And we're recording again, so hopefully that at least saves me some re-recording if the power goes out. I need to buy myself a new UPS battery. I've been putting it off for about 3 years. I do want to like this jet so badly. Like, I think it's a cute little plane. It looks nice visually, but I don't know. I couldn't kind of find synergy with it. Maybe I will over the next few days. I'll be streaming on Twitch as usual. By the time this video releases, I'll probably have already streamed it. It'll probably be like September by the time this video releases, but either way, I will be playing it more until the end of the trial, so maybe that magic sort of moment will click and I'll finally learn to love the Jeff, but I'm not really expecting it from what I've seen so far. Lost sight for a bit there, but regained. And then almost lost sight again. I was actually having trouble. It felt like my head position was kind of off in the Jeff. I don't know why. Like, my head wasn't pointing where I expected it to point when I was using my trackfile, especially when I was looking up and over my shoulder. We got another F-86 fight here, so this could be spicy. F-86s are pretty difficult to kill in any jet, let alone the modern stuff. Even the MiG-15 struggles with them, and it's, you know, the best kind of matchup for the Sabre. So you can see I'm kind of burning my speed to get angle of attack here, and I can pull about 20-ish. I can pull more than that if I really need to. There we go, 20, holding about 6G, so not bad. Again, at these lower speed ranges, it's not fantastic, but it's really not bad either. It is kind of like the Mirage of the F-15. If you get greedy and pull like this, you will struggle for airspeed. You'll have to recover it at some point, but if you need to bleed the speed for the angles for an instantaneous sort of snapshot, you can do it. The issue then becomes this horrible, horrible gun sight. Again, gun sight wouldn't be an issue if the gun was actually harmonized to it, or if the gun was on the center line. You can see me just missing repeatedly, because I'm not sure where the rounds are going. And at this point I was out of ammo, so I just sent a couple missiles instead. It's another thing to note, because it is a Gesha 23, it doesn't carry that much ammo. The jet's quite a small jet. I'm not sure how much it does carry, but it feels like about the same as the MiG-21, possibly a little more or a little less. But to me it feels like I get about the same length of burst with the Jeff's Gesha as I do with the MiG-21. I cut to idle there with the brakes out and I still couldn't shed the speed I needed to. Again, the brakes are just too small for the airframe. Well, not so much the airframe, they're too small for the power plant, I guess you'd say. I mean, the MiG-29's kind of pushing its luck too. Its speed brake's not very useful either, but the Jeff's is even worse. We have ourselves a MiG-21 here. I think this was Yellow Fox, so he's still reasonably new to the 21. He's still getting the feel of how to fly it in BFM. So, he's having a few struggles with wobbles here and there, and I was having struggles with hitting him because the MiG-21 is difficult to hit even with the best gun and gun sight combination on Earth. Like, it's just such a small, agile target. They're so difficult to hit. And in the Jeff, it's 10 times harder because of that misalignment between the gun and the gun sight. The other thing is the MiG-21 has fantastic nose pointing ability, arguably. I don't know if I'd say as good as a Jeff. It's actually technically worse in terms of sheer angle of attack, but in terms of controllability, it's a little better, I'd say, right up until you hit the stall. This is the thing. It's weird, because the 21 on paper is nowhere near as capable as I think it is, but when I'm flying it, well, if I'm flying it well, put it that way, if I'm having a good day, it feels so much more capable than the numbers say it is. It feels easier to fly, it just comes naturally. It can outmatch aircraft it really shouldn't. So it's just one of those things, I guess. Some aircraft just become second nature for you, and others are totally alien. You know, they just feel wrong, uncanny somehow. I guess the Jeff feels kind of uncanny to me. My habit of merging and going directly up into the vertical is actually really helping with the Jeff, because it's given me a chance to bleed my speed for a hard turn. Whereas if I stayed horizontal or, God forbid, went down, I'd probably pick up too much speed and I wouldn't be able to maneuver at all. So my usual vertical merge isn't really any sort of mastermind energy state bullshit. It's literally just I can see where they go easier if I go vertical. That's all there is to it. And with the Mirage, it also does position me conveniently above them, but that's about as far as the thinking behind that goes. It's not really any, you know, 500 IQ shit at all. It's a bit much to expect anything 500 IQ from me. So, although I have turn on him, if I fired a missile right now, it would probably never make that turn. The PL5 seems generally equivalent to a Sidewinder. Like a sort of mid-ish model Sidewinder. It's not equivalent to an X, it's maybe equivalent to like an M. You know, a Lima or a Mike. It will not make close-range sharp turns like that. It's not going to do what an R60 or an R73 could do at all. But it's pretty reasonable at medium range. Badly timed burst there. You can see me just fishing for a snapshot there, and I'm really struggling to figure out where my shots are going. You know, even with the full tracer loadout, I'm still struggling to land hits with this thing. A little bit of a stutter. Oop, oop. Jesus. DCS, please. I'm getting really close here. I know this is going to be an overshoot if I don't hit him. Or at least it probably will become an overshoot. So I'm really struggling to get my nose on for a shot. But here I spent all my energy and the Hornet can just easily start marching around a circle at me. This is me cashing the last of my chips here. And miraculously I make the shots connect. But he's still flying, and I'm not, because I managed to belly flop into the water. Still not familiar with the jets, so I was doing that a bit. I was tending to underestimate how much space I needed to recover from certain maneuvers.
Warning.
Somebody suggested I mess with the flight control there. That's why I was shaking my head and looking down at the FCS panel. Because I'd tried that the day before, and it had actually made things worse, so... I think I did try it for one of these fights, and I very rapidly gave up on it. That was very close. I don't know how I got away with that. It's a 16 from the looks of it. Oh, actually, no. No, it's another Hornet, I think. Yep, another Hornet. I think this is Polar flying the F-18 that I was fighting. Terrible whiff there. I don't know what I thought I was going to do. I almost lined that up, but I just wasn't committed enough. I needed to really commit into that maneuver, and I didn't. So here, this is bad BFM, by the way. Like, I don't want you guys to be under any illusion. I do not fly good BFM. You want good BFM? Do not watch me. I fly terrible BFM. I, more often than not, just go into lead pursuit and rely on my gunnery to carry me. And because I can't aim worth shit than Jeff, it's not working. In the Mirage, I just do dumb shit all day, and because I can make stupid shots no one even thinks you're going to take, I get away with it, basically. So don't fly like me. I fly bad BFM. Fly good BFM, then you won't have to worry about shit like this. So, like this, where I'm constantly trying to pull lead, I should have ducked out of this fight, like, 2 circles ago. Like, here I finally realize I can't sustain this, but I really should have realized that earlier. I just keep, and this is a habit of mine, this is why I'm so easy to bait into fights I can't win. I see that I'm so close on the angles, and I just think if I pull a little bit harder, if I just hold the stick in my guts a little bit longer, I will have the best deflection snapshot, or not even snapshot, best deflection tracking shot you've ever seen, and people, like, be beside themselves with amazement at how I hit anything, but it's not going to help, because I've just dumped all my speed. You know, it's being able to shoot people you literally can't even see because they're below your feet somewhere. That's a useful party trick, but it is not a good way of doing dogfighting, believe me. And it only works until people figure out what you're doing. Once they figure out what you're doing, it's very easy to counter. So if you watch, like, for instance, the way that Tawny flies now against me, I almost never get kills on Tawny anymore because he's figured out my game, and he just keeps his speed up and 2 circles me. And if he realizes I'm in a dangerous position, he just gets out of plane and then drags me down to the deck where he starts 2 circling, because he knows that I can't really keep up with him in that. So again here, I'm fighting the jet to try and get the nose position I need, and as the speed washes off, I'm slowly able to do it. But I don't have the confidence to make the shot, and also, you know, it's quite hard to see the Hornet in the shadow against the water. So I wait for a better opportunity, or at least what I think will be one. I've got the brakes out here, idle throttle, and I'm pulling for all I'm worth, but this is all the aircraft will give me. Looks like another chance here, maybe. So I cash the chips in, I miss because I'm out of plane. It's rolling a little and I shouldn't have been. And here I started to get some subtle wing wagging, like it started to wing rock subtly. So I had to break off that. I realized it wasn't going to work. At this point, I know that Pole is inevitably going to win. He's just going to 2-circle me to death. So I start focusing on trying to build a little bit of speed. I don't know what the Jeff's sustained turn speed is. Its best sustained turn rate speed. No idea. So I just had to kind of guess. I figured it's similar in plan form to things like the Viper or the F5, so I thought it'd be a bit high. But it didn't matter anyway, because Polar had the nose position to pull off those shots, and I couldn't get away from him. I realized too late that he had a shot on me. Now, for anyone who says, you know, oh, well, you've shown us that what you think of the Jeff already, fly something else for a change. Don't worry, it's coming. I flew, I think, 1 or 2 more fights in the Jeff, and then decided to switch over, start mixing it up a bit, because some of the other guys started changing airframes, and some of them were flying things they weren't fully confident with. Here I'm pointing out how silly this cockpit layout is to the guys in Discord. So yeah, don't worry, there will be some variety. I just wanted to make sure I got a fairly thorough test of the Jeff, as it were. Now again, this isn't a criticism of the module. I hope you guys don't view it as one. Deca did some pretty impressive work for this. Again, there's some stuff that I'm not happy with, and there's some stuff that needs fixing, and there's a few things that are, you know, kind of iffy on whether it's realistic or not. But overall, every module has those kinds of issues to a greater or lesser degree, and the Jeff just has so many beautiful little things, little attention to detail sort of touches, that even heat blur modules are often missing. Incidentally, like heat blur modules, you can stick your head out the cockpit. So Deca is basically like Chinese heat blur. But yeah, things like the canopy icing, the actual data cartridge that you can plug in, the TV pod, like the targeting pod, when you switch fields of view on it, you know, when you're switching focus on the camera, it actually briefly blurs as it tries to find the focus point again, like an actual, you know, like a camera does. It's really impressive just how much love they put into this thing, and I'm hoping they can maintain it like that. I'm kind of disappointed that they're trying to give it all the bells and whistles. You know, initially it released without the IFR probe and without the data link and stuff, because that's all Block 2 stuff, and it was originally a Block 1 Jeff, and they kind of cribbed those in, and now it's going to have Block 3 elements as well. I kind of wish they'd just picked a Block 1 and stuck with it, or gone to the Block 2 from the outset. I understand why they didn't, but, you know, I feel like I don't really want to use a gamey term for it, because I know people flip their shit over this, but power creep, essentially. DCS has a serious problem with power creep. You know, people say, oh, it's a simulator, there shouldn't be balance, and in a way they're right, and in a way they're very wrong. There shouldn't be balance as in unrealistically buffing and nerfing things, so one team has it easier or harder. There should be realism, but there also needs to be a consideration of external factors we don't have in the sim. Things like, you know, the amount of aircraft that one country has versus another. Things like the quality of pilot training, although to some degree that comes through with the players. Things like quality of maintenance, logistics, the number of hours on the airframe, the engine, the actual effects of the climate on the electronics, stuff like that. You know, just little things that DCS either doesn't simulate yet or doesn't simulate well. Things like that are what I usually mean when I talk about balance. But at the same time, there's a very definite skew towards particularly Blue 4, like Gen 4 Blue 4 stuff, but now with the Jeff we also have Gen 4 Green 4. So, you know, you get more and more precision weapons and more advanced systems, more and more fancy data link functions, all this stuff, and it kind of leaves the older aircraft in the cold. Like, I would much rather have an F-16A, like a Block 15 or something, or a Block 30, than I would the F-16C Block 50. I would much rather have an early batch FA-18A than a Charlie model with the upgraded engines. I would have preferred Heat Blur release the older F-14s, like the Alley Cat and the early 14A, USN 14A, before they released the late A and the B. Things like that. Like, I just really wish there was less hyper-focus on one particular, and I should say, one particularly small aspect of the game. You know, a lot of these aircraft haven't actually engaged in combat, or if they have, it was a very long time ago. I mean, the fucking... Here we go, I'm in the 29 now. I think I was fighting Yellow Fox here, because he was trying to learn the 29. But things like the vaunted 104-0 record of the F-15, I have doubts about the 0, but we can leave that for another day. That was all the F-15A with its shitty radar with a mean time between failures of like, no. That was the 15A that did all that. I think the Charlie's maybe got a kill or two tops. I don't even know if it has any. The 16, you know, I think it was Charlie Models 16s that got kills, but they were earlier Charlies. Yeah, like a lot of the stuff we have in DCS that people kind of coom over for more capabilities, the only aircraft of that type that ever actually made kills or saw combat beyond dropping precision guided weapons on some poor fucking goat herd, the only combat they've seen is, you know, on the earlier models, the less capable models, which none of the usual suspects want, because it takes actual, you know, more hands-on skill to use. Now, I'm not saying that the modern stuff doesn't take skill to use. It takes a different skill, a different level of, or not level, different kind of skill, I guess you could say. It's more of an IT type kind of thing. It's literally systems management, right? You're managing the aircraft and its systems. Whereas the older versions, it's very hands-on. There's little to no systems management. You are flying the aircraft directly. There's kind of a sharp divide between piloting and airmanship and then systems management, and I prefer the former. I like the hands-on feel of the older jets. So I kind of wish that we'd see a refocus. We're seeing it from some of the third parties, actually a lot of the third parties. There's a lot of Vietnam era stuff coming, although some of the US jets are in their 80s update versions, but hey, I'll take it. 80s is fair. But ED is still very much on the Gen 4 Blue 4 bandwagon, and I think they will be for the foreseeable. You know, they have said they'll do the 29A full fidelity, but yeah, we'll see. We will see. It's kind of telling that all the recent trailers for the game, the only Red 4 aircraft you see are, you know, kind of mooks to be blown up by AIM-120s. They make no effort at evading, and they never get a kill on anything themselves. God, I'm starting to sound like a conspiracy theorist, aren't I? Honestly, I swear to God, guys, I'm not wearing a tinfoil hat, but I really do think there is a inherent bias. I mean, it's really something when you see Russian devs saying how crappy Red 4 stuff is and why would anyone want it, which really kind of blew me away. You know, they might be less technologically sophisticated, but these are capable aircraft. You can see me here in my MiG-29 quite comfortably. That's actually not a MiG-29, that's not Yellow Fox, that's Polar. That is Polar in the 18, and you can see I'm rating him here without much trouble. I'm getting greedy and pulling too hard, so I'm kind of resetting the fight accidentally, but you can see when I'm holding my speed at 680-ish kilometers an hour, this thing rates the F-18 like nobody's business. It has no trouble doing it. Now, if he starts getting slow and reversing and doing stuff like that, I'm going to have problems, but in a two-circle rate fight, the MiG-29 is going to win, unless the 18 manages to run it out of fuel before the 18 runs out of fuel. Like, the 29 is just a two-circle monster, and people don't really seem to realize that. So here you can see me watching my speed, 680, keeping it in vertical scan, so I can pick him up as I pull onto his tail. We're a little fast. Now I'm pulling a little greedily, and I should have just let that go. I dumped a bit of speed there. I didn't fully reset my position, but I reset it enough to be a problem, and I'm still pulling. See? This is the trap that I fall into. I get too greedy. Way too greedy. I don't think that actually happened. I think that's a replay glitch. This was like a week ago, so I don't remember. But I think that was a replay glitch, because yeah, I would have replaned by now otherwise. What I think actually happened here is I'm pretty sure I ran him out of fuel, like we both ran out of fuel simultaneously or something. Anyway, let's just time accelerate this until I respawn. Because I think other than that one Jeff crash into the water, I think every other death I had, I was actually physically shot down. Forgive me for this. I know the screen's kind of freaking out. This is the occupational hazard of recording from a replay. I guess the TAC view will show all. We'll know if that was actually legit or not. But the fact it took so long to reset tells me that was a replay glitch. And that is an F-14. That probably would have been Yellow Fox there. Not something I get to fight very often in my MiG-29. Most of the fights I have done have been against Vipers and other MiG-29s, occasionally Su-27s, but very rarely do I get to fight an F-14 in this thing. It's a nice little learning experience. Trying to keep my speed up here because he's not really playing the turning game with me. I don't want to lose ground, but here he starts turning and I start kind of overstressing the jet a little, trying to pull for a shot. Still way above my best sustained turn speed, so just trying to keep up with him, close the range a bit, because he's just speeding around with those wings fully back. So I don't really have the opportunity that I'd like. Here we have a bit of one. I don't think there were any hits off that. And you can see as you pull the 29's nose, it tends to bunt forwards as soon as you relieve pressure on the stick at all. So when I'm pulling high angles of attack in the 29, you'll notice the nose wobbles quite severely up and down. Kind of like the MiG-21, but even more noticeable, I feel. The MiG-19 does this as well. I see a chance here, just looking for the lineup, and you see the first burst is almost on target and the second misses, because the second I fire as I release the stick. So he's missing a wing there, but still somehow going. So there's the finisher. And just in case, I'm thinking if I do another one of these Discord streams, I might, obviously I'll just put out in the announcement so everyone knows beforehand, because you should never ever record people without their permission. But I might put out like an announcement, hey, I'm going to do a Discord stream, just heads up, I'll be recording it, and then I'll record it as I play, so you guys can get both my commentary and what the other guys in the channel are saying, so any discussions we have kind of carry across. Because we had some interesting ones during this. I really wish that I'd thought ahead and actually, you know, kind of just set up a recording for it. I think I went to turn the air conditioning on there, which incidentally, I'm going to do again because I'm cooking in here. So forgive the background noise. Now we have MiG-21. I think this one was against Yellow Fox as well. So most of the early fights were against Sabre and Polar, and then Yellow Fox turned up for a lot of the later ones along with Polar. I think Sabre had to go partway through. Or I could have that backwards. Just before I left, Davey hopped on for one fight, although that was in a separate session, because I jumped out of the server, and then he's like, hey, do you want to fight? So we jumped back in for one fight, but I'm probably not going to bother recording that. You can watch it on his channel. Safe to say I got roundly spanked. Davey's a much better pilot than I am. So I've gone blind here, which is not good. And that was a mid-air collision. I think that might have actually been Polar. Some of the guys may be able to recognize their own fights. I can certainly recognize my own fights when I'm watching somebody else's videos, so... who knows, maybe they can correct me in the comments as to which aircraft is whom. We're now fighting a 14A, it looks like. This is going to be a difficult fight. Real challenge. Fighting 14s in the MiG-21 is generally an unpleasant experience. Even the 14A, it lacks the thrust of the 14B, so it can't stand on its tail and climb up like the B can, but it still has that really nasty turn performance, which the MiG-21 struggles to keep up with. Once an F-14 gets those big wings out and starts turning on the deck around 300, 350 knots, you're never going to keep up with it in the 21. So at the moment, I'm actually having a pretty good day of things in the 21. I'm quite disciplined, I'm not pulling too hard, I'm sitting just where I want to be, between 28.5 and about 30, 31 degrees local AOA. Of course, the moment I said this and was like, wow, I'm actually flying well today, I immediately had a wing stall. Because, you know, why not? I think it does also help, though, that I was watching the UUA, the angle of attack indicator. The problems usually begin when I'm not looking at it at all and I just go by feel. Because it doesn't take much of a change to where my stick is positioned relative to my chair or whatever for me to lose the muscle memory, as it were. So he's gone up. It looks like he's going to go vertical, but instead he goes back into the horizontal, so I decide to use a bit of a climb here to force the nose back around. Then I start reconsidering because I don't want to get into a head-on pass. And right here I start to worry because I see that big nose pointed right at me. So I pull just enough to get out of his sight picture, climb up over the top. But again, at these kinds of speeds, the Tomcat will quite happily stay with you. Even if he can't quite get a shot on me, I'm definitely not going to get a shot on him. So it's really not a good situation to be in. This is where you'd be calling up your wingman and begging for him to come and bail you out. Because this is kind of a stalemate. Maybe a slight advantage to the F-14. A little bit of a wing rock from him there. Maybe we'll just say it's contagious, that's my usual excuse. There's any moment now. Any moment. Nope. I guess not. Not yet. But you will see one here shortly. See, I managed to get back offensive on him, but it's not a very offensive position. If I had an R60, it might have made that turn. It certainly won't make this one. But the Tomcat also has, you know, a magical missile approach warning system in the form of Jester, and also a boat, like an absolute boatload of flares, countermeasures in general, but especially flares. So it's very hard to get a kill on them with the R60 unless Jester's either, you know, being taken over by a human player and they're not looking at you, or he's asleep. Because he will call out any missile launch, even if it's somewhere he shouldn't actually be able to see. Like, he has no apparent blind spots at all. Which is, you know, understandable. It's a wonder they got him to work in the first place. It's just kind of annoying when you're on the attacking side of things and the F-14 magically knows when to dump flares every time you fire a missile at him. So I've kind of put myself in the shit here. I'm now more or less defensive. I was kind of hoping he wouldn't be able to recover that. And sure enough, he couldn't. Nearly had it, but I think he just lost SA of where the water was. He was lower than he thought. Because it looked like he did recover it, but then he sort of eased back into it, like he thought he had more altitude to play with. There's me demoing for the guys on Discord. The MiG-21's high alpha pass. Although it didn't stabilize as steep as I thought it would. I've had it stabilize at much steeper angles before. I think I had one that was about 40 degrees, but it was mostly sticking around 22. That is true AOA though, from the telemetry chart down the bottom. The UUA reads in local AOA, so it's probably reading off the scale at the moment. It'd be like 40 something local. Incidentally, the radar's fixed. I'm running on the most up-to-date NVIDIA drivers for my card, and as you can see, it's both displaying targets and ground clutter, and there is no loss of frame rate, so I know a lot of people are getting pretty hot under the collar and demanding that, you know, why isn't the fix out yet? Oh, it's abandonware, whatever, but these things take time to fix, and Magnitude were genuinely trying to fix this for a very, very long time. I would not be surprised if the MiG-21's radar issues didn't delay some of their future modules by a couple months, just because of how long it took them to figure out how to fix it. Which is, you know, you got to remember, DCS is running on a very old engine. It's kind of a pig with lipstick on at this point. But not only that, but the third-party devs don't necessarily have top-level access to the game code. So they don't necessarily know what's wrong, and it's hard for them to figure it out without ED's help. And if ED doesn't help, which they didn't with the radar bug, at least not last I heard, it can be a real pain to sort things out. And this wasn't even caused by the game as such, it was caused by something in NVIDIA's graphics drivers interacting badly with the game. So you've got two different things you need to reconcile there, and you have control over neither of them, so I know, like, I understand why people were really pissed off and annoyed and why they kind of tried to take it out on the devs, but at the same time, don't take it out on the devs, guys. It's really kind of shitty. Like, believe me, they want their modules to work too, unless they're VEA or... They really, you know, don't want their shit to be in a broken state, but there's only so much they can do with the resources they have. As it is, the fix was completed more than a week before it was actually released because ED didn't put it into the patch, which it had been submitted for, and it had to come out as a separate hotfix. Ah, there we go. There's the wing wobble. I knew it was coming. And because of that, I lost sight. Thankfully, I regained it pretty quickly, but for all the worst possible reasons, that's a pretty definitive kill. We had one swing of the chute. That's all. Just one swing. So here I decide to do some memes. However, as I try and remember how to get the Harrier into air-to-air gun mode, I soon realized that Mobetta Meta has apparently forgot to put gun pods on it in this part of the mission. So we're in the one of the 1 vs 1 areas. I think it's 1 vs 1 area 2 or 3. Might have been 2. And we had no guns. Or at least I had no guns. So it took me, I think, 2 or 3 respawns to figure it out. So bear with me for a minute here, guys. I might actually just time accelerate it. So you can see me trying to figure out why I've got that error cross hatching. Checking all my switches are on, and I still can't get it to work. So I decide it's time to replane. Same thing again, checking everything over. Why can't I get my gun to work? And then I realize, oh, I don't have one, that's why. So at this point we abandon the idea of a Harrier fight, as fun as it would have been. And I decide to take the Tomcat out for a spin instead. This is the F-14A, by the way. All of the F-14s I flew during this session were the A model. I figure if I can get reasonably good in the A, then I should be able to slap with the B, so... I think from now on most of my fights will be in the F-14A, just to build that extra little bit of energy management, that little extra bit of care. So then when I'm in the B, I should have a whale of a time.
We have a bandit, 12 o'clock, 6 miles. Missile, 12 o'clock, hot, brake right. Missile, 12 o'clock, hot, brake left. Bandit, F5, 12 o'clock, 1 mile. Spike, 12 o'clock.
We've got the classic Top Gun matchup happening here. Might not be a MiG-28, but it is wearing an aggressor's livery at least.
F5, 12 o'clock low.
And it's at this point I just like to declare that VSL High is possibly the most underrated close combat mode the Tomcat has. You can lock people across the 2-circle with it. It's fucking beautiful. I love it. It's second only to the ACM mode, like the HUD area sweep, in my opinion.
Shoot him.
So you can see, it's not that difficult for me to pull in, it's just a case of holding the aircraft stable for the shot.
Bandit is down.
But I do get it in there. I do like the Tomcat, like I really like the Tomcat, I just don't fly it as much as I'd like to. Now, interestingly enough, there's some teleporting happening while I'm spectating that guy after death. I don't remember if that was happening when I actually played this live, or if that's a trackfile artifact, because I only ever saw one of my opponents teleporting, and it was only very briefly. So the server in general seems not to have too many issues with that.
Pucker time. Target, 9 miles. Missile, 12 o'clock. Hot. Break left. Missile, 12 o'clock. Hot. Break left. That's a 5.
Here we go with the rematch.
O'clock. $5
I actually lost sight of him there for a moment. Thankfully he lit his burners, so I picked him back up.
11 o'clock.
You see, I'm starting to get a little rough with the old girl. She's not real happy with me.
3 o'clock high. $12. 8
Wasn't quite quick enough on the rudder there, and I was a little slow on the throttle. I'm still getting used to the F-14A and the much longer time it takes to spool up and down, and particularly the slow ignition of the different afterburner zones.
12 o'clock.
But as with all modules, I'm still too slow with my feet on the rudder. I've really got to pick that up. That's one of my big shortcomings in real life flying as well, is I'm just not on point with the rudder as much as I should be. Now at this point I realized that I'd somehow fucked something up with my gun sight. Or at least, oh, was it this flight? No, it might have been the next one. There was one flight where my gun sight was not where I expected it to be at all. I thought I might have broken a gyro or something, but...
On a 6, you got this.
Well, it could have actually been this one. He lost situational awareness there, and just kind of spiraled in. I think he said I got a hit on him somewhere, and like the aircraft wasn't handling right, but I can't recall for sure.
Heads up, Nails. 12 o'clock. Okay, we're on.
Just for anyone who's not aware, the only aircraft I've flown so far in this that I don't own is the Jeff. I own the MiG-29, I own the MiG-21 obviously, and I own the F-14. I just felt like breaking things up a bit. The Jeff kind of frayed my nerves a little, and I wanted to get in some last-minute practice with different airframes before I went away for, you know, an indeterminate amount of time, basically.
Target, 3 miles.
Here we have a MiG-21. So this is going to be interesting. The tables are kind of turned here.
6 o'clock. $12 low. $12 low. $12 low. $12. Shit, he's almost got us. Coming right. $5 low. $9 low. $11 low. $8. 12 o'clock high.
So as you can see, even the A doesn't struggle too much with the 21, but if you let your guard down and you start playing the MiGs game, you're going to have a bad day.
9 o'clock low.
And this is a bit of a fairer matchup because although the F-14A does have a lot of advantages over the MiG-21, I am not a good Tomcat pilot. To be fair, you know, like I said, a lot of these guys are still getting to grips with the 21. Out of everyone in my group, I'm pretty sure I have the most hours in it, although I'm definitely not the best pilot. That would probably be Davey. But a lot of the other guys are still learning it. A lot of them just picked it up recently, so it's good to see so many people in the MiG-21, but, you know, you got to kind of be realistic in your expectations. It is an easy aircraft to learn, but it's very, very hard to master. So it's going to take a lot of them some time to really get to the point where they can take on an F-14 with it. I'm still not consistently there. I can do it some days, and other days I can't, so...
Good job.
So one of the things I like most about it is there's always something new to learn and always something to improve at. I think that's a large part of what draws me back to it again and again. So you can see here, I've got a good sort of position, but I just can't quite make the angles work. Every time I get close for a shot, he wriggles out of it, or I start to get wing rock and I can't line up. Again, my rudder work's pretty lacking. Right there, I just see the chance and I take it before he shimmies out of it. And luckily, that was all I needed. Now, something that's actually worth mentioning, because it's come up as I've been reading through my copy of Yefim Gordon's Sukhoi Interceptors book over the past few days.
We've got nails on our 12.
At these distances, like, you know, a couple hundred feet, let alone meters, at these kind of ranges, you are in such severe risk of ingesting debris and blowing up one or both of your engines, it is not even funny. So that's, you know, a serious risk that a lot of us don't really think about in DCS, but in real life, that's a consideration you have to think about. You know, are you going to lose your engine and potentially your aircraft from killing someone else's? You know, and that's not missile debris, that's gun debris. You know, imagine what missile debris is like. So I do kind of dimly, in my heart of hearts, hope that in the future DCS does offer FOD at least as an option, if not as like an actual default thing. Because I'd like to actually see the effect that has. I really would. I think it'd add a whole other element to fights and make it a lot more interesting. You know, kind of like how in Rise of Flight or the new IL-2 series, you can potentially take a piece of debris to your aircraft and lose a wing or a prop blade or something. It's a lot of fun. I really do wish that DCS had something like that. And it would be realistic for jets. Like I said, you know, there's enough reports in there of test pilots getting too close to a target drone and losing their engine and having to eject as a result. It's also something that the way I fly in DCS is very different to real life. In real life, if your jet is that badly fucked up, 9 times out of 10 you're going to eject. Only the craziest of crazy test pilots elect to dead stick land an aircraft, and usually only then if they know they can make a runway. Belly landing off a runway is almost never done. It does happen, but it's extremely rare. And part of the reason for that is something which isn't modeled in DCS, which is, aside from the chance of the wreck, you know, bursting into flames after you land, because of ruptured fuel tanks and so on, there's also a very real risk that the pilot will snap their neck from the impact. Because you've got to remember, you've got a great big heavy helmet on your head, and you're strapped tight into a seat. So as you decelerate, you're going to get really bad whiplash, potentially enough to kill you. And if you survive that, then you know you might bounce your fucking head off something, and the helmet only protects you so much. So it's something I never really thought about. I mean, I'm not going to stop trying to belly land planes in DCS. I find it fun and challenging, you know, even if it's not 100% realistic. But it's something to think about, I guess. Something that's different in real life. And honestly, in real life, I would probably try and eject as well. You know, it's one thing to try and save the airframe, but a lot of the time after an off-runway landing, the airframe's totaled anyway. You know, at best, it's going to be cannibalized for parts. It's very rare for jets to be put back in service after they belly landed. It does happen occasionally, but it's very, very rare. It was much more common during World War II.
Picking up nails on the
Because, you
nose.
know, simpler aircraft, much easier to repair.
Target, 8 miles.
I see 2 smoke trails.
12 o'clock.
Sure enough, it's another F-14.
6 o'clock.
So this is F-14A versus F-14A. Again, I'm not a stellar Tomcat pilot at all. I rarely fly the thing, and when I do, it tends to be, you know, not this. It tends to just be cruising around or joy flights or whatever. I very rarely get to do BFM in the Tomcat, and usually when I do, it's the JDF guns area, which is not really representative of my individual skill, more so how distracted everyone else is. So it is nice to get out and do some 1v1s in it. I've just really got to work on flying it. I'm not where I need to be with it yet. But I'm getting there slowly, I think. I used to not be able to fly this thing in BFM at all, but I'm getting to the point where, against a sort of moderate opponent, I can usually do pretty well. Against the AI, I can usually win unless they're in an F-16. You know, the F-16 with all the fuel pulled out of it and clean config, and that's a struggle, but against MiG-21s, F-5s, whatever, the AI for those are not that big of a deal. Players are, as ever, the actual challenge.
12 o'clock, 12 o'clock.
You may also notice that despite me making constant power changes while flying the F-14A, not once do I get a compressor stall. Not once. You have to be doing something pretty silly to compressor stall this jet, let's be real. And as long as you're not seesawing, literally seesawing between idle and afterburner, the throttle, at a really high angle of attack or really low speed, you should be fine. Or high yaw angles, that's the other one, because it blanks one intake. But really, the TF-30s aren't great, but they're not the horrible killers that everyone makes them out to be, at least not in DCS. And see, she wanted to auger in there, so I just kicked the right rudder to get her out of it. It's the most basic bitch rule of these old mechanical control aircraft, especially things like the Tomcat, which are variable geometry and steer from the tail. Do not try and roll with aileron, or in this case spoilers, when you're at high angles of attack. Use the rudder instead. That's going to be a big one for the F4 Phantom when it eventually comes. Even if we get a slatted version, but if we get a slatless version, that's going to be a huge thing, is never, ever, ever roll with the spoilers, well, spoiler and flapper on, as it is on the Phantom, if you're at low speed, high AOA. I think in the actual flight, I pulled that out in time. I guess we'll see if I respawn here. Oh, no, I didn't. There you go. That was a death. I lost SA and went into the water. So there we go. That one was legit. I probably will upload a video of the TAC view as well, so you guys can compare and contrast what TAC view says, which was recorded real-time, more or less, with what the replay says, because as we know, DCS replays, client replays anyway, can be a bit hokey. And I don't have the server replay from this, and even if I did, it won't show my cockpit, right? So 14 versus 14 again. I think this is towards the end of our fights. I think I did a couple more after this and then I had to go.
12 o'clock.
So I was going to try and stitch the different parts of this into one video, but the storm seems to have passed somewhat.
6 o'clock.
So I might just upload these as two separate parts, rather than stitch them in together and waste a day or two rendering the video again. I'll just upload as is, basically. I'm using OBS to record this instead of Frap, so it should already be encoding in roughly the same format I use to stream. So it should be reasonable file size for uploading to YouTube. If I use Fraps, the file size for this would be like 100 gigs, easy. And then I'd have to go through and encode it through
12 o'clock.
Through Movie Studio or Movie Maker or whatever the fuck it's called. Not the Windows one, the other one. Brain no work. But yeah, when I do that, I've noticed it tends to tween the frames a lot. So you'll notice everything's kind of blurry and it feels almost more fluid because it's tweening frames. But it's also at a lower bit rate, so it sucks a lot of the color and contrast out of the image. Which is the same issue I have when streaming, so that's why my stream, I have a filter on the output to bump up the contrast and the saturation, because I know it's going to lose both of those through the encoding process. So that's a little handy hint for any up-and-coming DCS streamers out there. DCS in particular has very washed out colors, unless you use something like Reshade, and especially if you run at higher gamma settings. So, for me personally, I had OBS open. I had to do it alt-tabbing, because at the time I didn't have the second monitor, and my second monitor's colors are out of whack anyway. But what I did was I was alt-tabbing between OBS and DCS to just try and make sure the colors and the contrast and the brightness all matched between what I saw in-game and what I saw on the OBS output, pretty much. And it's more or less right, it's not 100%. The other thing I've noticed as well is the YouTube encoding, or like the encoding I do to put the videos on YouTube rather, as well as sucking the color out and some of the contrast also makes it much darker. So it's harder to see things sometimes. So in this case I just decided to go with OBS. Easier to do, quicker, less fussing about. It means I won't be able to do any post-editing, but I don't think there's any need to, I can't be bothered.
He almost has us. Eight o'clock low. He's coming right. Seven o'clock.
I was way slow here, way below my best sustained turn speed. Like I said, it's very easy to pull me into this kind of silly one-circle fight. I'm not entirely sure what happened there, nor how I apparently lost sight of him during that maneuver.
3 o'clock low. O'clock.
See, the Tomcat's really protesting to what I'm doing here.
10 o'clock high.
I don't want to make this into a head-on, although it doesn't look like he's pulling enough for it to be one. So I dip my nose here and kind of roll into him. That was actually a mistake, as I almost set him up for a head-on. But here...
3 o'clock low.
I don't know why I delayed that maneuver so long. I wonder if the...
3 o'clock low.
I almost wonder. Yeah, this track file's out of whack.
6 o'clock.
That's interesting. I've never seen another player's playing desync like that. Okay, well I guess that's a sign to stop this here. We'll go through the remaining fights in the tac view. That's really weird. I've only ever seen AI do that. I've never seen another player's plane do that. Anyway, guys, let's just end this where it is, which is a shame because you're going to miss some really sweet crash landings I did after running out of fuel or losing hydraulics. But thanks for watching. I will be uploading those tac views separately. I won't, probably won't, well, I might narrate them, but I won't take as much time to go through them as I usually do. I'll probably just sort of fast forward through most of them. There's not a lot to see in most of them. Anyway, cheers for watching. Next time I do one of these Discord streams, I will try and announce it a little more than 30 seconds before I punch the go live button. And I will try and record it as long as everyone in attendance is cool with that. So then, for anyone who isn't in Discord at the time, or misses it, or whatever, I'll be able to put it up on YouTube. Because I think some of the discussions that came out of this session were actually quite interesting. In the meantime, have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you on the next one.